And when my task on earth is done, when by thy grace the victory's won, in death's cold wave I will not flee, since God through Jordan leadeth me. He leadeth me, He leadeth me, by His own hand He leadeth me. His faithful follower I would be, for by His hand He leadeth me.
Have a seat. Good evening. Welcome back to the Beltline Church of Christ. Thankful that you're here today. If you look to the screen, you can see that we're going to talk about leadership tonight. All of the songs that we just sang kind of encompass the idea of leadership and servanthood and all that goes with that. And you know, I love the concept and the topic of leadership. I have read so many different books in the course of my life. A lot of my master's work revolved around leadership, particularly church leadership, and really enjoyed those classes. Some of them weren't so good, but others of them were really great. And so I want to talk a little bit about that tonight. I, like many of you, have been in the church my whole life, but where we may differ is that I have seen just about, I think, all there is to see as far as leadership in a church goes. I have been part of churches like this one who were blessed with amazingly good leaders, great leadership, great abilities to encompass a church and to call them to something more. I've been a part of churches, for lack of a better word, who have had very bad leadership, and I'll be very nice by calling it bad leadership. I have agonized in a church that has had no elders but decided to do this thing called men's business meetings. And I am convinced beyond any shadow of a doubt that this is not only contrary to Scripture, but detrimental to the congregations that do it. It's another lesson for another time. We're not going to get into that tonight. But there's no example of that in Scripture. There's no model of that anywhere to be found throughout the whole New Testament. And again, I won't preach there. I'm just going to let that go. I've also been a part of congregations that every decision that ever had to be made had to be run through the congregation as a whole. And that's a challenge as well. I've seen people who never should have been in leadership attempt to lead and fail miserably. I've seen people without a title of leader be the heart and soul of a church when it came to leadership. I've seen conservative, I've seen liberal, I've seen everything in between in my short 39 years of existence on this earth. I'm not saying I'm an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I think this gives me a little bit of qualification to speak to you a little bit about leadership tonight, and that's what I want to do. And included in that are going to be some thoughts about our elders and our deacons and that kind of stuff. But understand that what I'm talking about tonight is also directed toward every one of you, because leadership is what we do. Leadership is what we should be about. And I don't simply want to talk about, as we think about elders and deacons and all of that, the typical lesson on eldership and deaconship will be, well, here's the qualifications listed for you in 1 Timothy 3 and in Titus chapter 1, and let's dig into that. And there's value in that, but that's not what I want to do tonight. Instead, I want to get to the heart of leadership itself. And so I'm entitling this series of lessons, Follow the Leader. And I want to begin tonight by talking about some mistakes that leaders often make. Now, lest you think I'm picking on those who may be leading this church, our elders, our deacons, I'm not. That's not my intention tonight. Next week, I'm going to talk about all the mistakes that we followers often make. And so by that point, everybody will be mad at me, and it'll be an interesting point, an interesting time. We're going to finish this series of lessons by looking at 8 different qualities that I believe a leader must possess if he's going to lead or she's going to lead in any capacity whatsoever. So, having established all of that, how about we dive into some of the mistakes that leaders often make? Here's mistake number 1. We're only going to talk about 3 of them, but these 3 really encompass a wide variety of things when we talk about leadership. Mistake number 1 is that I have a title, therefore I'm a leader. This is a mistake that leaders often make. I've heard elders say, well, we are the elders. People should just do what we say. They should just follow where we're trying to take them. And to me, this, unfortunately, may be an indicator of a disconnect between what real leadership is and what they're attempting to do. There's nothing wrong with having a leadership position. And we're going to talk a lot about leadership position tonight. There's nothing wrong with that at all. The problem is when we use that leadership position to force people to follow us. And I want to say it this way. Position is a poor substitute for influence when it comes to leadership. And leaders must find a different way to lead than to say, I've been given a title, and so therefore you have to do what I tell you to do. It doesn't work in a marriage, it doesn't work in corporations, and it's not going to work in the church either. There may have been a time when that type of leadership worked. There may have been a time when people followed a lot easier than they do now. I just don't believe that's where we are today. And you can get angry and you can say, man, well, we need to go back to that. We need to get back to that model where people respected leadership. We can get angry and we can do that, or we can recognize that a shift has taken place and we can find a new way to lead. We can find a new way to do the things that need to be done anyway. Leadership is a process. It is not a position. And I want you to hear me tonight. Leadership is a process. It is not a position. Think about Jesus for a moment. Was there ever a time in the life of Jesus Christ where he came out and said, okay, you need to do what I said because I'm the Son of Almighty God? Was there ever one moment in the life of Jesus when he used his position to say, now follow me or else? No, that's not the way he did it, was it? No. What do we see Jesus doing? Well, what we see Jesus doing, Paul talks about in Philippians chapter 2. This was his leadership style, and I think as the greatest leader in the history of the world, we should take some notes and understand the way Jesus led it and try to emulate that. What do you think? You think that might be a good idea? Well, here's how Jesus did it. He didn't say, I'm the Son of God, you've got to follow me. No, he comes and he does something completely different, like many of the songs that we sung. He says, I'm just going to be your servant. I'm just going to be your servant. Philippians chapter 2, verse 5. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself by taking on the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Jesus did not use his position to get people to follow. Isn't that exactly what Satan asked him to do, though, in Matthew 4? He says, cast yourself off. You're the Son of God. Angels will recognize you and people will come to follow you. And Jesus says, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not what leaders do. Leaders find a different way. Now, when you have a position of leadership, there are some positive and some negative things that need to be recognized when someone gives you a title as leader, elder, deacon, CEO, COO, whatever capacity you lead in. There are some positives and some negatives that go with that, and I want to talk about those a little bit tonight. Here's the upside of what Maxwell and so many of the other business leaders out there today call positional leadership. This is the upside of positional leadership. Number one, and this is big, leadership positions are given to people because somebody sees something in them. And so if you've been given a title, if you've been given the role of elder, per se, in this church, that's a beautiful thing. Because what that means is that somebody saw something in you. The congregation saw something in those people. They see them serving. They see the way they handle themselves. And they believe that there's something in that person that is worthy of following. And so they say, wow, that's a good thing, right? That's the upside of positional leadership. People believe that there's something about you that's worth following. Here's the second upside. Leadership position means that authority is recognized. Now, there's a big difference between recognized authority and people actually following you. But when you have a position, authority is recognized. And that's where we're going to leave it right there. 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 1 through 5, we see the negative side of this. What we see is Samuel's boys who have been given a position of leadership, but they are anything but leaders. Remember what they're doing? They're cheating people. They're swindling folks. They're doing all kinds of immoral things. And so even though they had a title, they certainly weren't leaders. Even though the congregation of Israel recognized that there was some authority given to them, they didn't follow it because they weren't following God. And so that's kind of the negative side of that. And it was their lack of leadership that led the people to cry out for a king to rule them and led to an even greater disaster in the country of Israel back in that time. And so leader position means authority is recognized. It means somebody saw something in you. Number 3, and this is huge, leadership positions are invitations for you to grow as a leader. Elders, deacons, those of you who are here today who lead in any capacity, you have a title, and that is an opportunity. It's an invitation for you to grow as a leader. And to me, this is maybe the most important point of the whole night. Too many elderships that I've been a part of thought that, okay, I've been given this leadership position, I've arrived. I've been a part of several different churches in my life, some as a member, others as a minister, and this has been a common theme. There's no desire for those who have been given the position of elder to actually grow, to actually challenge themselves, to learn, to go beyond where they are at this very moment. There's no desire for them to be challenged. Some elders think they have arrived and now everyone is going to have to get on board or get off the bus. That's not leadership. And that's a dangerous place for the church to be. That's what we read in 3 John. You remember this little tiny book in 3 John? There's a guy there who does just that. He takes advantage of his position, and his name is Diotrephes. And we read about him in verse 9. Paul says, I've written something to the church I need you all to get, but there's this guy, there's this Diotrephes there. He loves to have the preeminence. It's all about him. He doesn't listen, doesn't recognize our authority, doesn't listen to us, doesn't do the things that he's supposed to be doing. When I come, I'm going to take care of him. And then he says this in verse 11, don't imitate what's evil, instead imitate what's good. You want to know good? He says, follow Demetrius. There's a leader that we can get on board with. Diotrephes, on the other hand, no, we don't want anything to do with him. And so leadership positions are an invitation for you to grow, to not be satisfied with where you are, but to challenge yourself, to move deeper and deeper and deeper, especially in a church setting, to move deeper in love with Jesus and deeper in your knowledge and your understanding of that word. That's an opportunity for you that is amazing, and that's a very positive thing. And here's the last thing we'll talk about as far as the upside of positional leadership is concerned. And it's this: leadership position allows leader to shape and define how they are going to lead. You've been given this position, authority is recognized, it's an opportunity for you to grow. Now, you get to determine how you're going to lead. That's just a beautiful thing. You don't have to do what everybody before you's done. You can do it in your own way. You don't simply follow the examples that were before you, although there may be some value in that. The problem is, what if that which went before you wasn't healthy? If it's not healthy and you just do what they did, we could find ourselves in a very unhealthy place, right? And so there's some really positive things here, but there's also some warnings. Just because it's the way we've always done it doesn't mean it's the best way. It doesn't even mean it's the most godly way. Leaders take a look at what's going on and are willing to do the hard work to find the ways that are going to impact people the most. Positional leadership, upsides. Now, let's talk about some of the downsides. This is where it gets a little shaky. Here's the downside. A leadership position, just because you have a title, that title will always promise more than it can deliver. And this is probably not the best way to word this. I actually stole this right out of Maxwell's book because I couldn't find the right words to say, and I'm not real happy with this. But a leadership position promises more than it can deliver. Let me try to unpack that for a second and understand what I'm saying with that. Leadership is not a noun. Here's what I mean. Leadership is not a noun, it's a verb. It's a verb. It's not about who you are, it's about what you are doing. Leadership is action, not position. And I think the perfect example of this comes from John chapter 13, where Jesus takes a towel, girds his waist, and washes the 10 toes of every single one of the disciples. Right? He's modeling for them what leadership really is. He's modeling what it's supposed to look like. Rather than just talking about it, he says, here's what it's supposed to look at. I'm going to show you what real leadership is. And so a leadership position promises more than it can deliver. Number 2 of the downsides, leaders who rely on position only to lead. You have to follow me because I'm an elder. You have to follow me because I'm a deacon. You have to follow me. The person that relies on that and that only is often the person who's going to devalue people. They're going to devalue people. Let me say it another way. People who rely on their position to lead are almost always going to place a very high value on holding on to their position. Does that make sense? They're going to worry about holding on to their position above everything else that they do. Their position becomes more important than the work they're supposed to do. This happens with ministers all the time as well. Their position becomes more important. And what happens is the relationships suffer, morale plummets, and people start to think, these guys don't believe in me at all. These people don't care about me at all. All they care about is holding on to their power, holding on to their position. And you know as well as I do that that is a very familiar tale in the church. May it never be here. God forbid. Number 3, positional leaders often feed on politics. And here's what I mean by that. There's a lot of maneuvering. Positional leaders focus on control instead of contribution. And that's a problem. Positional leaders, number 4, place rights over responsibility. They do things to make themselves look and feel important, and in so doing, they develop a sense of entitlement that says, well, I'm the elder, I'm the deacon, I'm the whatever, I can do whatever I want because I've been given this title. I have that right. King Saul is a perfect example of that. I'm the king, you're going to do what I say. And that's not going to fly. That's not going to be a leadership position that people are going to get behind. And that leads to these last 3, and we're going to run through these quickly. Positional leadership is lonely. It really is. And how many times have you heard elders feel that way or hear of elders feel? It's just lonely. I don't feel like I have anyone to talk to. It may be because you're relying on your position more than just simply leading. People, here's the worst part of this type of leadership, people ultimately abandon that type. Why? Because it's too hard. It's just too hard. And so people walk away from that. They don't want anything to do with that. And finally, positional leaders receive people's least, not their best. I'm going to do as little as I can. And this is contrary to Scriptures. Colossians 3:23 says we need to work to the best of our ability, those of you who are out there who aren't in a position of leadership. This is not an excuse, but what happens is we say, what's the least I can do to keep these guys off my back? And man, do we not see that in the church sometimes? Why is it that 20% of the people end up doing the majority of the work? Because sometimes when a church is led by positional leaders, they're going to do the bare minimums just to get by, just to keep them from visiting my house, because I don't want that. I'm just whatever I can do to make that happen. I hate to say it, but I have spoken to many an elder or deacon who, to them, serving was a nightmare and a chore rather than the blessing God calls it to be. And we're going to talk more about this next week, but it leads me to believe that we have something backwards when that is happening. And I'm not saying that's happening here. Please, again, I'm not attacking our elders tonight. That's not my call. That's not what I'm trying to do. But oftentimes, the reason leadership is so lonely and so miserable is because the people who are called to follow that leadership are being ridiculous. And can I get something from you that oftentimes church people are ridiculous? Thank you. Yes, that's right. Other times, it is leadership, and we need to recognize that. And so instead of blaming everyone else, sometimes we just need to take a look at the mirror and say, okay, how am I doing? What am I doing here? Am I going about this in the right way? Am I leading the way God calls me to lead? So let's just say you are one of those positional leaders. How do we get out of this? Well, I think there's 3 things we can do, and then we're going to move on to mistake number 2. 3 things to do to get out of this leadership position rut. And the first thing is this: we need to stop relying on our position to push people. We got to stop that. That's not going to be effective long term. It may get you immediate results, but it's not going to get you long-term results. And so stop relying on your position to push people. Number 2, trade entitlement. I'm a leader, therefore I have the right to do this, and instead move. You yourself move. You yourself get out of there and do those kind of things that are supposed to be being done. Number 3, leave your position and move toward your people. One of the greatest books on leadership I ever read was They Smell Like Sheep by Lynn Anderson. Great book. I highly recommend it. And this book says a real leader is going to smell like a sheep. You want to know why? Because they're among the people that they're leading. They're not in some distant, far-off place saying, hey, come this way. No, they smell like the sheep because they're working and moving and interacting and being right there with the other people that they're called to lead. And so they begin to smell like the sheep, and the sheep know their voice, and the sheep follow them. It's a beautiful picture. Jesus models for us the same thing in Matthew chapter 20. He says in verse 26, whoever would be great among you, that's the one who's going to be your servant. And so all of this is modeled for us perfectly in Jesus Christ. So if you ever need a great picture of what leadership looks like, you have to look no further than the Gospels and look to Jesus Christ. I want you to know this about our eldership. I am so blessed to be a part of this church and to be under this eldership. This eldership doesn't want you to follow simply because they have a title. That is not their heart. That is not what they want. They want you to follow because you want to follow them. They want you to follow because of who they are and what they represent. They want you to follow them because you want to and because you have seen them try to the best of their ability to love people and to love God. And this type of leadership is so hard. And oftentimes, the only thing that most churches have ever known is positional leadership. And so even our leaders have a tendency to fall back into that leadership position rut. That's not these guys' heart. That's not how they want to lead you in this church. And I'm so thankful for that. But sometimes we fall back into those ruts. And when that happens, we make mistake number 2. Mistake number 2 is simply this. Thinking that management and leadership are the same thing. This is mistake number 2. Management and leadership are the same thing. They are no way even close to being the same thing. Management and leadership are not the same thing. So it's a big mistake when we believe that they are. You see, management is at its best when what? When things kind of stay the way they are. And what do most churches want? They want things to stay exactly the way they are. We don't want to be challenged. We want to stay right. We're comfortable right here. We like it right where we are. So don't come and try to mess up our mojo. We don't want that. And this is why so many churches fight so hard against change in any form or fashion. But leadership deals with people and their dynamics who are constantly changing. There's no such thing as people that don't change. Everybody's changing. People are changing. And when you try to manage people instead of leading them, it's going to be extremely difficult to be successful. And this is what Peter's talking about in 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 2. Do you remember this passage? Peter says, to the shepherds, he says, shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, listen, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. He's saying, don't micromanage people. Instead, just show them by being the leader yourself. Show them by being the leaders that God was. You ever had a boss in your life who was a micromanager? None of us like micromanaging bosses. I don't care who you are. Nobody likes that style of leadership. Everything you do is scrutinized. Everything you do is evaluated. No one wants to work for someone like that. Do you think that volunteers want to be under something like that? No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Every little thing you do is scrutinized. No volunteer is going to willingly sign up for that. Elders are not managers. Deacons are not managers. Elders are called to lead. They're called to mature and help grow the congregation spiritually. Elders are crucial to the health of a congregation. And without elders, the maturing of a church family is going to be difficult to near impossible. Don't you dare devalue the amazing importance that God places on leaders, on elders in specific in a church. Don't do it. But here's what often happens. And I speak from experience on this one. Elders end up doing the deacon's job. Deacons end up doing ministry leader things. And leadership is left up to your ministers. That's what often happens in a church. And while ministers often do a lot of things that elders do, that's not my role. That's not my exclusive role. That's not what I'm called to do. But that's what happens. Is that elders become deacons, deacons become glorified ministry leaders, and then leadership is left to the minister. That's a problem. That's not the biblical mandate that we have for leadership. If I'm honest with you, that's exactly what happened in a church I was serving at. The elders were unhappy with me because nothing that I did, but the congregation stopped looking for them for leadership and started looking to me. And it was very, very easy for the congregation to do that. You want to know why? Because I, for the most part, was with them all the time. I was the one praying with them. I was the one ministering to them. I was the one studying with them. I was the one baptizing their kids. I was the one doing all of that kind of stuff. And the elders were content to sit in a back room and make decisions and tell the church, here's what we've decided. And that was not a healthy model. And so our deacons were frustrated out of their mind because they were being micromanaged to a level that every single thing they did had to be stamped first by the elders, who were desperately trying to regain control of everything because they felt like they were losing it. And when leaders begin to lead out of fear, trouble's coming. Trouble's coming. Leaders don't manage, they lead. I was watching TV this afternoon, and there's that Geico commercial. I just got to throw this out there. This is not in my notes and probably not appropriate, but there's the lady who loves this guy who's on a horse. Words really can hurt you. Have you guys seen this one? And she says, "Don't leave," and he says, "A loner's got to be alone." And he gets on his horse and he rides off, and the end pops, and he runs into the end sign and breaks his neck. It's an interesting commercial. And the point, I don't know why that popped into my head, and I really don't know why I told you that, but leaders don't manage. Leaders got to lead. They're not going to do anything but. That's what they're called to do. I like the way Paul says it to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 2. He says, "What you have heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." What's going on here? A leader doesn't simply manage people, they release them. They release them to service. They entrust what they've been given to other people, and they let them go. They let them run. They give them parameters, they give them guidelines, but they let them go. A leader is on the move. They're among the people. They're constantly looking for the best spot to lead people next. They have vision, they have passion, they have courage. And oh, how Christ Church needs leaders like that. And how blessed we are to have men among us who are committed to that. You guys don't recognize, I would dare to say, how blessed we are to have the men that we have leading this church. And man, I hope, and we're going to talk about this next week, and I'm going to make you really mad, and that's okay. We're going to talk about how we need to be lifting these men up, not continually tearing them down. We need to be coming to their aid, not bringing more fuel to throw on some fire. We're going to talk about that next week. But first, we've got to talk about mistake number 3. Mistake number 3 is simply this. The mistake is that people think that good leaders have to have all the answers. Good leaders have to have all the answers. Bottom line, we know this, don't we? No one has all the answers. We know that up here, don't we? We know that in our head. Everyone knows that. But when somebody acts as if they do have all the answers, it's an amazing turnoff. I don't want to be around people like that. The ones that always have every single answer, even though they really don't. A leader, listen now, a leader doesn't have to have the answer. And admitting that they don't have the answer, to me, is not a sign of weakness. You know what it is? It's a sign of authenticity. And authenticity will draw more people to you than simply having an answer will. Are you hearing me tonight? But sadly, many leaders believe they have to know it all. I mean, how am I going to keep my position if I don't have an answer to the question? No, a leader needs to think differently. That's not the right way. A leader's job is not to know everything. A leader's job is to attract people who know things that they don't. That's the beauty of leadership. And when that realization comes, people are called upon not just to give answers, but to help find the answers. And the difference in that is huge. This way of thinking, this idea that I have to have all the answers, you know what it leads to? It leads to a my way or the highway mentality. I've got all the answers. And if you want to know what they are, just come talk to me. And if you don't like my answers, you can get off. You can just go. Just don't let the door hit you. And that's often what we see even in churches sometimes, and that's scary thought. It's the same spirit of Diotrephes that we read about earlier in 3 John. I want to add this as well. One of the most important things that a leader can do in any capacity is learn how to listen. James speaks to this in chapter 1, verse 19, when he says, let everyone be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. When you have all the answers, you don't listen. You instruct. You inform. When the guy knocks on your door with the tract, he doesn't come to listen to you. This is why I don't really have a lot of time for those, our Jehovah's Witness friends who come and knock. I don't have time. I really don't. I've tried talking. I've tried all that. It just doesn't work. They're not there to hear or listen or learn. They're there to instruct. And so why do I waste my time with that? Why do I waste their time with that? I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to tell thank you for coming and be on your merry way. And Lord willing, something will happen in their lives that will cause them to wake up and see the truth of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Because unfortunately, I don't believe they have it. But that's another lesson for another time as well. But when you have all the answers, you're not listening. And I want to say this, listening and hearing are not the same thing. Listening means I'm paying attention not only to what is being said, but how it's being said as well. I'm being aware of language and voice and tone and demeanor and how people are using their bodies. In other words, it's being aware of not only their verbal message, but their nonverbal message too. It's not sitting there thinking, okay, how am I going to respond whenever this guy finally stops talking? How am I going to respond to what they're saying? And isn't that what happens? Sometimes we just do that. We get in this mentality that says, man, I got to know how to answer this guy, and so instead of listening to what they're saying, I'm simply listening or thinking about how to respond when they're done talking, whenever that is. I wish it would be soon, because I want to talk. That's sometimes what happens in leadership. No. It's being fully invested in the moment. And I'm going to say this, and please don't look at me weird. I really don't like I did today, I really don't like standing at the back door and shaking everybody's hands. And here's why. It's not because I don't like to shake your hands. I love to shake your hands. I love you guys. But I have no meaningful conversations with anybody on the way out. I'm shaking your hand, and then I'm moving to the next hand. Then this guy walks up while I'm trying to say something with this one. I'm shaking that hand. I'm shaking hands everywhere. And I know that that's an expectation, especially of preachers in the South. But I just don't like it because I think it's fake. And I don't want to be fake, right? I mean, half of the names I don't know that are going out, and it just drives me crazy. And so there I am trying to do this thing that I really don't like to do, trying to have conversations that really nobody's going to remember a week from today or even tomorrow, and I just don't like it. I want to be able to engage you. I want to look you in the eye. I want to have a conversation that makes sense and that makes a difference, not just a, hey, how are you? When leaders listen, they're able to ask the right questions in the right ways at the right time. By the way, I'll still shake your hand some. Just know that deep down I'm really not liking it. But that's just know that. When a leader listens, they're able to ask the right questions in the right way at the right time. They're able to see things that people may need in order to do a better job. They're going to be able to help people meet and surpass goals in their life. These are the things that good leaders are able to do. On and on and on we could go talking about that. Leadership roles, especially here at church, are all around us. It doesn't matter if you're in a youth group, if you're in Bible class, if you're at a retreat, or you're a deacon, or even an elder. Leadership can be applied to any situation where someone is required to take the lead. And ideally, leaders become leaders because they have credibility and because people want to follow them. That's certainly what Jesus displayed on a regular basis. And so I want to finish with this tonight. I want to finish with this story, and this again is from John Maxwell. To me, the premier author and speaker on leadership, especially with a Christian viewpoint, is John Maxwell. So if you can get your hands on anything he's written, I would encourage you to do so. Here's what he says. When a Marine goes into combat, they don't wear their insignias of rank. And one reason is so that they don't want their officers and non-commissioned officers to be targeted by the enemy. But there's another reason that they don't wear their insignias of rank. When Marines go into battle, they already know who's in charge. That chain of command has already been established. Nobody needs a reminder of that. And so by not wearing the symbols of rank, the leaders send a very clear message. From leader to follower, here's what they send. We are in this together. We are in this together. We live or die together, regardless of the rank that we hold. And I think that's a great illustration of what leadership is supposed to be. We live and we die together. We're not in a back room making decisions that everybody has to get on board with, whether it makes sense or not. We're out there with you. We're leading. We're showing you the green pastures and the still waters. We're doing those things because we've spent that time with God, and we know the direction that we're supposed to go next. I say we. I'm not an elder. Don't want to be one at this moment in my life. Don't have the qualifications that go with that anyway. I'm talking for these guys today. That's the kind of leaders they want to be. And I hope that you will cut them some slack. And I hope that you will hold up their arms, because we are blessed to have the leaders that we do here in this church. And so if you want to do something really cool, how about hug their neck and thank them for what they're doing? How about remind them, not just today after you've heard a lesson on leadership, but continually. You guys are great at sending cards to folks. How about sending some cards to them? I know they send cards to you every week. How about sending some cards to them? They didn't ask me to say all this. They didn't ask me to they didn't put me up to this. Although they did say talk about leadership, they didn't tell me about what to talk about leadership. So they may be mad at me right now, and that's okay too. I'll get you guys mad at me tomorrow, and again, it'll be great. Or next Sunday, it'll be great. But hold them up. I want you to ask yourself this question. We ask it all the time of preachers. Who ministers to the minister? We say that all the time. My question to you tonight is, who ministers to the elders? Oftentimes, they only have each other. I want to suggest to you that we can do better as followers. We can do better of holding them up, of lifting them up. We can do better of not making their job a chore, but instead making it a blessing. And I hope that you'll get on board with that, and that we'll move together in that direction. Tonight's not a lesson designed to bring anyone to faith in Jesus Christ. It's kind of more of a housekeeping, a church family message, and I hope that there was some benefit in that today. But I want you to know that the invitation of Jesus Christ is always open. And tonight, if you need to be baptized, we're ready to do that. If you just need to repent of some sin in your life, if there's some prayer things that are on your heart that you just need us to pray for you about, we want to invite you to come right now. While together we stand and we sing this song.